Hi, everyone, and welcome to Between the Prompts, where AI meets research, the show where we explore how AI is shaping research. I'm Vanessa.
And I'm Lauren. We're both researchers who are curious, sometimes skeptical, and often excited about how AI is showing up in research.
In each episode, we dive into a topic that's on our minds and probably on yours too, whether you're a student, a faculty member, or just trying to make sense of all the AI buzz.
Today, we're talking about using AI at the beginning of the research process. We'll talk about developing research instruments and what role AI should play. We call this episode Measure Twice, Prompt Once.
So I love this title because it emphasizes how important it is to plan before prompting and not just go on a fishing expedition. And if our intent here was to just use AI to go on a fishing expedition, well, gosh, we might have called this Gone Fishing for Instruments. Or how about hook, line, and prompt?
No.
No. Casting questions, AI as the master angler?
All right, that's better.
Or fishing for constructs with AI. Oh, I could keep going all day long with this one, Lauren. What do you think?
I think you're having too much fun with AI.
All right. Well, why don't we just tap it back onto what we're focusing on today? I know we're going to talk about how we've seen people using AI for instrument development and a little bit of how we've explored it ourselves. What's your experience been so far in this area, Lauren?
To be honest, not too much, as I am still cautiously optimistic about AI. One of the things that I have done that I will say is I have put in different instruments that I've generated and checked for alignment, checked for errors, checked for any inconsistencies. I've also prompted it to say, oh, you are a participant who is age 18 and undergraduate, gave it some more of a persona and kind of asked it, would you understand what I'm trying to ask? Would there be any edits that you think I should make? So that's really as far as I've gotten with the instrument generation.
How effective has it been for you in these attempts?
Overall, okay, but obviously there are some issues and errors that come up, but I still do that human usability when I do surveys and I have other instruments that I create. AI was able to give me some interesting feedback, but I still feel like the feedback that comes from my usability folks is a lot better.
Yeah, I get that. I've actually tried to go back and play with it a little earlier in the instrument development process just to see what would happen. I've gone and tried to see if it could recommend instruments in an area. So if I'm starting with an idea, what would you suggest for me? And I just wanted to see if it was going to be any better than going through the literature manually and trying to do my own check for existing validated instruments on a topic, or going into a database like APA tests and seeing what comes up through those searches. Honestly, my experience with it has been extremely hit or miss. Probably what's been most interesting about it for me is that it could quickly open things up in an interdisciplinary way or suggest some other ways that I might think about a particular topic or construct or related constructs that I might not have been thinking about in that moment. So just this general association kind of thing. But in terms of recommending actual existing validated instruments, the hallucinations are just awful.
I was going to ask you about that because in a previous episode, I talked about my discussion with a librarian who said, she's having some issues with faculty needing all of these sources that have been hallucinated by AI. So I can't imagine that it doesn't hallucinate different types of instruments for data collection purposes.
Oh, yeah, it's the same hallucination problem entirely. So then moving on to instrument development, right? That would be the next logical part of all of this, trying to get it to develop instruments. And I say that because it can recommend things. It'll often say, would you like me to develop an instrument for you on this topic? Fabulous research idea, Vanessa. Would you like me to help you develop a survey on that topic? And I'm having fun, so I'll say, yeah, sure. I kind of go with it and see what happens. I find that the instruments that it develops are fluffy. Mine likes to have 12 questions. I don't know why. It always just likes 12 questions.
12. I wonder where that magic number comes from.
I really don't know. I'll use it for different things. I was having students do practice interviews in a class a week ago, I needed interview protocols on fairly generic topics, just some questions on a page so that they could practice their interview skills with each other. And I got it to generate a few sample interview protocols for me that the students could use. We debriefed it after they had their experience, and that was fun too, because the students told me that in some instances, the questions just seemed bizarrely generic. The question circled back around again, so that if you'd already dug in on question 3, by the time you get to question 8, question 3 just being asked again through different words.
Where I see.
Yeah, so you got to be real careful with that. So I think just like carte blanche, develop my instruments is really not the best idea. I also noticed like it doesn't fully understand why or how we would put validated scales in the middle of a larger survey. So if I tell it, go ahead and design a survey for me, it won't say, oh, and let's pull in this validated instrument to measure this construct for you. It'll just start coming up with its own questions that are generally about that topic. But I'm not going to be able to do anything interesting or worthwhile with it at the end unless I put in that validated instrument, because I can't use it as one of the variables in my study if I just have some random AI written question on, the topic of self-regulation. So again, it's limited, but targeted use, I think, can be effective.
And tell me a little bit more about what you mean by targeted use.
I think it's what you were starting to talk about as well. Well, like you said, imagine you're this kind of a participant, and would you be able to use this? I have done things in the past, like asked it to knock down the reading level for something that I have written up as part of an instrument, or if I find that I'm just like way too stuck in my academic mind today, I can ask it for alternative wordings to something because I'm just not thinking of a more common way of saying something without bringing in some of the technical terms that I know aren't going to play well, for example, in an interview setting.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually had some interesting results when I put in an interview protocol that was meant for undergraduates. So obviously this Gen Z individuals, and the wording that came back was very interesting. It was very much trying to play to that Gen Z discourse. It was nothing that I would have wanted to be on an interview protocol. Sometimes you have to be very direct. Yes, you want your participants to understand, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in their quote unquote lingo.
I kind of want to try that out now and see what happens. The alignment check that you mentioned, I think that actually is useful. I don't think that it negates the need for human eyes on it at the same time, but I think it could be an extra check and balance. So that's not a bad thing. I also think that for testing out instruments, like playing Be My Interview Participant, that can be useful. But again, the human putting it in, I think our last episode, we talked about brains versus bots. I think that the brains still need to very much be there. I've asked students who I'm supervising to test out their interview protocols, for example, and to give it to secure, so they're not feeding the beast here, but to give it to secure AI and ask it to be a participant to pretend there's an interview. Now, you're not going to get prompting on this interview or any extra stuff, but you can really start to see if your questions fall flat or if you're getting the kind of data that you want. That said, the more descriptive you are of who the participant is, the better the response is going to be. And I wouldn't just try my interview protocol one time. I might try it 5 or 6 times. So it's like I'm amassing a small data set through doing this. And I might tell it, let's see, if we're looking at, let's say these are interviews with teachers. Let's interview teachers about AI use. And if I don't give any further direction, the first teacher will invariably come up and be a positive person about everything. And the second will be positive. And then I might say, the second person needs to be skeptical of it. And then I realize I haven't heard from anybody who's really brand new and doesn't have a sense of things. So then I say, okay, this next one is a teacher who's been in the classroom for exactly 1 month and who has a lot of questions and uncertainties and doesn't feel very confident as a teacher. And then I need to come back and say, okay, this next participant is a 20-year veteran who has extreme negative views about it. So I want to see the full range of what I can get in the data set.
Interesting. All right, I like that.
Yeah, it's cool. So I've got an idea if you're game.
I'm always game.
All right. You want to play? You want to play with, let's see what we can get from AI for some instruments?
Let's do it.
So last time I was talking about playing with this idea of a study on trust in AI tools in higher education. So why don't we take that and see what we can get recommended from our AI tools?
What tool are you using?
I'm using Copilot. What are you using?
I'm using Claude.
Okay. So for all of our listeners, we've got the same prompt that we just put in. It reads, I'm designing a study on trust in AI tools used in higher education. Can you help me identify existing survey instruments or validated scales that measure trust in technology, trust in AI, or trust in educational tools? Please include details like constructs measured, sample items, and sources if available. To be clear, this prompt was actually generated by AI. I asked it to generate a prompt to ask it for suggested instruments. So I'm always curious about the number of things it comes up with. Mine came up with 4. How about yours, Lauren?
Well, Claude's still pondering, so I might need a second.
All right. Well, while we're waiting for Claude to come in, I'll tell you what I'm getting here. And this is not an area of my own expertise, so I'm just really looking at this stuff for the first time. I'm going to point out that this is not the way to do your research. You just say, let's dream up a topic and now let's see if AI can give me instruments on it. You actually do, as the researcher, need to have much deeper knowledge in your area. I don't have the deep knowledge to judge these instruments that are coming in. I've got a trust in automation scale and a short form trust in automation scale. I've got an epistemic trust in generative AI for higher education, Nazaretsky et al.'s AI EdTech Trust Instrument, and a teacher's trust in AI-based EdTech instrument. It's not really telling me where these came from. Oh, wait, I can get to the sources over here. At least one's coming from an article published by Springer. There's a Frontiers in article. Something's coming from ResearchGate, and something's coming from, I think, from a university repository system. Has Claude finished thinking yet?
Claude is done thinking. Claude gave me key validated scales for trust in AI. So the first one was the trust in automation scale. I'm pretty sure you said that. And then the trust between people in automation. So it's the TIAS and the TPA. Trust scale for the AI context, the TAI. Teacher's trust in AI EdTech instrument.
I got that one too.
The theory of trust and acceptance of artificial intelligence technology, the TRIAT. General attitudes towards artificial intelligence scale, and then the cognitive affective trust scale for AI. So some of ours overlapped, which is interesting. I don't know what your output looked like. So for me, for Claude, it gave me the name of the scale. It gave me a brief description, and then it gave me the actual constructs that were measured, the key findings, and then the source. I'm interested to know, what did Copilot put out for you?
Copilot gave me a summary table with the instrument, audience, key constructs, and sample items. And there are links that I could follow to go out to the sources, which is how I was telling you that things came from Springer or Frontiers but I didn't follow them. I went ahead and asked it for some additional instruments to see what it was going to come up with. I want to point out the biggest part about this. I'm thinking about what's different from this process versus if I were working with one of my doctoral students in the process. And it has not asked me what my research questions are. It has not asked me anything about my research context. It is just spouting things out at me. So in that sense, this is not tremendously different from going to any one of the library databases and putting in a query and getting something out. Now, at the end, it's asking me, would you like me to draft sample items or help to adapt an instrument to your study context? Would you like help adapting one of these scales for your student population or study design? I think I'm going to ask it if it can adapt an existing trust scale to focus specifically on AI tools used by students and faculty in higher education. Let's see where we go with that. Okay, so now it is, well, see, this is interesting. And this is where you have to be super careful. Okay. So it has come back to me and said, here's an adapted version of a trust scale tailored specifically for AI tools used by students and faculty in higher education. This version, you ready for this? Mm-hmm. This version draws from existing instruments like the trust in automation scale, the trust This is hilarious. It says the trust in automation scale, TIAS, the trust in AI scale, TAIS. Oh my gosh, all these TAIs and TIAs, I'm going to have my head explode pretty soon. But now that we're getting into it, I'm not sure how it is breaking down these scales. I'm not sure if it's pulling apart different subscales. I'm not sure if it's mixing and matching them. So whatever about these scales was validated is not looking so validated to me anymore. That would be my huge concern about doing this.
Absolutely, because we would want to, when we eventually administer the scale and then write up the results, we'd want to be able to say which pieces we took from each of these validated scales. And this isn't showing any of that. I'm getting the same thing in mine as well.
Yeah, so I think that's just a huge concern. And if I were to be taking, as on the human side, so on Team Brains, if I were to be taking one of these scales and adapting it for use in my study, noting that it was a validated scale, I wouldn't be just dropping out items that I didn't like. I might be figuring out the way that I needed to adjust the wording specific to my context. So, for example, if the wording was about at work, I might change it to at school because I'm talking about at school and not at work in my context. But that's a really small modification. It's still one that we need to acknowledge when we're doing it. But that's very different from saying, hey, look, there's this existing validated scale and it consists of 8 items on this topic. And I think I like 2 of them. So I'm going to take them and put them on my survey. And that's just not something that is okay to do. You could do it if you're trying to construct a completely and totally new scale, and then you're going to retest and revalidate all of this. But, well, I didn't tell Copilot that's what I was doing. It didn't ask if that's what I was doing. And I could see the potential here for somebody to think that AI was doing them right as they planned their study, only to find out that AI was doing them very wrong.
Yep.
So now I'm going to just try one more thing today. And I'm going to ask it to generate new survey items for me to measure this area. I just want to see what kinds of things it comes up with in the survey. And all right, I already have 5 topic areas that it came up with, and it's giving me 3 items for each one. It's got trust in AI for learning, trust in AI for teaching, for assessment, transparency and understanding, and ethical use and fairness. Those are the 5 dimensions that it came up with for me. How about you, Lauren?
It's broken it up into these different sections. Trust in AI for teaching, so faculty focused. Trust in AI for assessment. Contextual trust factors. Calibrated trust. Longitudinal trust dynamics. And then comparative trust.
What is comparative trust?
So it describes it as trust relative to alternatives. So basically, one of the questions is AI versus traditional methods. One of the questions is, I trust AI-assisted learning as much as traditional textbook-based learning. Another one is AI assessment is as trustworthy as traditional paper and pencil testing. Ooh, I don't know if I like those, Vanessa.
Okay, but I see where it's going. You can see where the large language model just starts making connections and building on to like, okay, we're going to compare with other forms of teaching or other forms of assessment.
Correct.
So now it's asking me, would you like help turning these into a full survey instrument with scoring guidance or adapting them for the faculty perspective as well? And so it's like telling me almost like, oh, you don't just have to do this as a study with students. You could go on and do it with faculty. And I could just keep saying, yes, please, more. And it can feed me more and more. I could see where that could feel really powerful to somebody as a researcher that, you know, wow, I could sit here with a cup of coffee in half an hour and I could have a gazillion instruments ready to go out and deploy into the world. But I'm going to have to come back to this question of, is there actual meaning in all of this?
Exactly.
And I'll just have you know that I went ahead and asked it to build me a full instrument with the scoring guidance. And so the scoring guidance is telling me that there are 2 items that should be reverse coded because it put them in the negative, I presume. Yeah, like I feel uneasy using AI tools when their processes are unclear. That item also might be kind of unclear for somebody to answer because the negatives in there become a little bit confusing. Then it's telling me to calculate an average score for each construct, like learning. That's a little bit dangerous that it's suggesting that I call those constructs and calculate average scores for them. And then it tells me to average all 15 items after reverse coding for a composite trust score. Then, and it put the items on a Likert scale, 1 to 5. It tells me I should interpret this as between 4 and 5 is high trust, 3 and 3.9 is moderate trust, and below 3 is low trust. Just like that. And now I know everything I need to know in order to do this study.
Yikes.
I can see that you are blown away by Team Bot right now, Lauren.
Yeah, Team Bot's not making its case for me to get on its side. Still fully on Team Brains here.
Yeah, so on this topic of instrument development, what I'm seeing here is that we very much need the brains to guide the bots here to make good decisions, to make psychometrically sound decisions, and to ensure that the research that we're doing is truly meaningful from an instrument perspective.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, Lauren, where should we take our Team Brains versus Team Bots battle the next time?
Our next conversation is going to be around AI and the literature review.
All right, fabulous. I'm looking forward to that, and we'll see you all next time on Between the Prompts, AI and Research, where apparently these days we have battles between brains and bots.